call came at 6:47 in the morning, and I know that because I'd been awake since 5, staring at the ceiling fan in our bedroom, thinking about how I needed to reschedule my dentist appointment and whether we had enough coffee filters. That's what I was thinking about when my phone rang. Coffee filters. The voice on the other end was flat, professional, careful the way hospital voices always are when they're delivering something they've practiced. "Ma'am, are you the wife of Daniel Forsyth?" I said yes, but it came out wrong, like a question. He told me there had been an accident on Route 9, near the Millbrook overpass. A delivery truck had run a red light. My husband's car, the blue Civic he'd had since before we met, the one with the cracked dashboard he always said he'd fix but never did, had taken the full impact on the driver's side. "They were working on him," the voice said. "I should come now. I don't remember putting on shoes. I remember the parking lot of Mercy General being very bright, too bright for that hour, and a woman in scrubs meeting me at the entrance, and her hand on my arm guiding me somewhere. And then a waiting room with chairs the color of old mustard, and me sitting in one of them, and nothing making any sense at all. Daniel didn't die that morning. That's what people always assume when I tell this story. He didn't die. But what happened next was, in some ways, harder than if he had. He was in surgery for 11 hours. When the surgeon finally came to talk to me, she said the words spinal cord and L1 vertebra and no guarantee of function below the injury site. And I understood enough to know that our life, the life we had mapped out, the one with the house we were saving for, and the trip to Portugal we'd been planning for 3 years, and the baby we'd just started talking about, that life was gone. He was 31 years old. I was 29. We had $4,200 in savings and a joint credit card with a $6,000 limit that was already at $3,800 because we'd paid for the flights to Portugal on it. Portugal, God. My mother-in-law drove 6 hours from Savannah and arrived at the hospital still in her church clothes, and she held my hand and cried and said, my boy," over and over, and even in my shock I was grateful she was there. She's a small, fierce woman, the kind who brings food to every crisis and fixes things with sheer force of presence. She made calls. She talked to the insurance coordinator. She asked questions I didn't even know needed asking. My own mother called that evening. She was at a ski resort in Vermont with my stepfather. They'd been planning the trip since October. A week at Stowe. His birthday gift to her. She said, and I remember this exactly, "Oh, sweetheart, that's terrifying. Is he going to be okay?" I told her I didn't know yet. She said, "I'm going to light a candle for him tonight at dinner. The chapel here is beautiful. You'll be okay. You're so strong." She did not offer to come home. I didn't ask. I was still in shock, I think. I was still in the phase where you believe that people who love you will simply show up, that you shouldn't have to ask. That belief had a very short shelf life. The bills started arriving before Daniel was even out of the ICU. This is the part nobody tells you about medical catastrophe in this country. The paperwork doesn't wait for your grief. Our insurance covered a portion of the surgery, but the rehabilitation facility, the specialized equipment, the physical therapy, the neurologist consults, the out-of-pocket projections made me physically nauseous. The hospital financial coordinator, a tired-looking man named Mr. Ellison, sat across from me with a spreadsheet and walked me through numbers that didn't feel real. Somewhere between 60,000 and 90,000 in the far first year, depending on Daniel's recovery trajectory. I was a third-grade teacher making $41,000 a year. I sat in my car in the hospital parking garage and called my mother. Not my mother-in-law. She was already doing so much, and I didn't want to ask more. I called my mother because that is what daughters do. You call your mother. She picked up on the third ring. I could hear a restaurant in the background, voices, cutlery. I told her the numbers. I told her I didn't know what to do. I didn't ask for money, ask outright. I said I might need help figuring this out. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Honey, we just don't have that kind of liquidity right now." Stanley put everything into the remodel. Her second husband, the kitchen remodel they'd been talking about since 2021. New quartz countertops. But you're so resourceful, you'll figure it out. Have you looked into disability assistance? I had been at my injured husband's bedside for 9 days. I had not yet had time to research federal disability programs. I said, "Right. Yeah, I'll look into it." She said, "I really think everything happens for a reason. Daniel's going to come out of this stronger." I hung up and sat in the parking garage for a long time. My sister called 2 days later. She's 4 years younger than me, still in grad school, living stipends and her boyfriend's income, and I hadn't expected anything from her. She asked how she could help. She drove 3 hours the following weekend and sat with Daniel so I could go home, shower, sleep in my own bed for one night. She brought food. She didn't say anything about reasons or strength. I've thought about that a lot since then. The people with the least gave the most. 3 weeks after the accident, my mother called me. She had news, she said. Her voice had that specific brightness it gets when she's sharing something she's excited about and doesn't want to read the room first. She and Stanley were going on a cruise, the Caribbean, 2 weeks, leaving the following Friday. They'd found a last-minute deal. Norwegian Line, one of the big ships with the water slides and the specialty restaurants. Stanley had been so stressed from work. They really needed this, she said. They'd be mostly unreachable because the ship Wi-Fi was so expensive. I held the phone and looked at Daniel across the room. He was doing his daily upper body exercises, the ones the physical therapist had assigned. He'd gotten some sensation back in his legs, which the doctors called encouraging but cautious. He was trying so hard. Every single day, he was trying so hard, and some days the pain was so bad, I could see it in his jaw, even when he was trying not to show me. I said, "Mom, I need help. I need you here. Not just a call, here," she said. "Sweetheart, the deposit is non-refundable. We'd lose $4,000. I said, "I might lose our house." She said, "You're not going to lose your house, you're catastrophizing. You need to talk to someone, a therapist. Is there a social worker at the hospital?" I said, "I need my mother." There was a pause. Then she said, gently, patiently, the way you'd speak to someone being unreasonable, "I'm always here for you. You can call me anytime. But I can't put my whole life on hold. This trip has been planned for months." The trip had been planned for 3 weeks. I found that out later. She went on the cruise. She sent me a photo from Nassau. Turquoise water, her sunglasses pushed up on her head, Stanley's arm around her. She captioned it, "Wishing you were here." I turned my phone face down and didn't look at it for 4 days. My stepfather has a brother. I'll call him my uncle by marriage, though we'd only met a handful of times at holidays. He called me out of nowhere, a week after the cruise photo. He'd heard what was happening from some family grapevine I wasn't even aware of. He asked specific questions. What did our insurance actually cover? Had we applied for SSDI? Did we know about the state's catastrophic illness program? He was retired, an ex-accountant. He spent 2 weeks making calls on our behalf, completely unprompted. He found a nonprofit that assists families of spinal cord injury patients. He helped us file the disability application. He drove over one Saturday and went through every bill on the kitchen table and told me which ones to dispute and how. He saved us, I think. Not completely. Not financially. The numbers were still brutal, but he gave us enough scaffolding to stand on. He's not a warm man, he doesn't hug. But he showed up, and he did the work, and I will never forget it. I told my mother what he'd done. I thought she'd be grateful, or at least acknowledge it. She said, "Oh, good. See, you had people around you. I knew you'd be okay." As if his help retroactively justified her absence. That was when something shifted in me. Not cracked, shifted like a bone resetting. Quiet and permanent. Daniel made progress over the following year and a half. More than the doctors expected, which felt like grace. He regained partial function in his right leg. He could walk with a cane for short distances. He went back to work part-time, remotely, doing the data analysis he'd always done. But from home now, from a desk we'd rearranged the whole living room to accommodate. We didn't lose the house. We came close. There was a month, March, I think, where I genuinely didn't know if we were going to make it, and I lay awake, doing math in my head until 4 in the morning, and then I got up and made lunches for 32 8-year-olds and taught them about fractions, because life requires that of you regardless. My mother visited once during those 18 months. She stayed for a weekend, slept in our guest room, and spent most of the time telling Daniel he was inspiring and telling me I looked tired and asking if we'd thought about refinancing. She meant well. I actually believe that. I think she loves me the way she's capable of loving, which is warmly and from a safe distance, with a lot of statements about strength and reasons and things happening for a purpose. But I had needed something she didn't give during the worst period of my life, and that need sat between us like furniture in a room we both pretended wasn't there. What cracked it open, what finally made me stop pretending, happened 14 months after the accident. My mother called to tell me she and Stanley were renewing their vows. 25th anniversary. They wanted to do a ceremony on the beach in Hilton Head, a small gathering, family and close friends. She was so happy about it. I'd never heard her sound that happy on the phone, actually. She told me the date. It was the same weekend as Daniel's first post-injury half marathon. He had been training for 7 months, walking, then jogging, then slowly, painstakingly, building back something that looked like running. His physical therapist called it exceptional. He called it the only thing keeping him sane. The race was in our city. He'd asked me to be at the finish line. I told my mother I couldn't make it to Hilton Head that weekend. She was hurt. I could hear it. She said she'd been planning this for months, that it would mean so much to her, that she understood Daniel's situation, but surely this was important. I said, "Mom, he almost died. This race is his. It's his proof to himself that he came back. I'm not going to miss it," she said. I just think that after everything, after how hard the past year has been, we could all use something joyful. This is joyful. Can't you come for one day? I said. You didn't come when I called you. Silence. I hadn't planned to say it. It came out clean and flat like a fact, which I suppose it was. She said, "That's not fair." I explained about the deposit. "I know about the deposit," I said. "I also know that when my husband was lying in a hospital bed and I called you, you were already planning a cruise. I know that for the first 6 months, the person who actually helped us was Stanley's brother, who we'd met maybe 4 times. I know that you visited once, for 2 days, and mostly talked about refinancing. I'm not saying this to hurt you. I'm saying it because I think you need to know that I noticed." She cried. She said she'd done her best. She said she didn't know how to handle medical situations, that they made her panicky, that she'd been scared and hadn't known what to do. And I believed her. I believed all of it, actually. I don't think she's a bad person. I think she's someone who is deeply uncomfortable with suffering and has built a very effective life around avoiding it. That works fine until the suffering is your daughter's. "I love you," I said. "I'm not sure how to do this with you right now. I need some time." I didn't go to Hilton Head. We didn't speak for 4 months. She called a few times. I let it go to voicemail. My sister served as a quiet intermediary, not pushing either of us, just keeping me informed that our mother was sad and that she was sorry, in her way. In those 4 months, something happened that I wasn't expecting. I exhaled. I didn't realize how much energy I'd been spending, managing her feelings, cushioning my own reality so she wouldn't feel guilty, framing things so she wouldn't worry. It had been a constant low-grade labor, and when I stopped doing it, I had more of myself than I'd had in years. I started sleeping better. I'm not even sure how to explain that except to say that some weight I'd been carrying as normal suddenly wasn't there anymore. My mother reached out 6 months later, really reached out, not a voicemail, but a long email. She had been talking to a therapist, she said. She knew she'd let me down. She had a lot of language about patterns and her own upbringing, and why closeness made her pull away, and I read it twice, slowly. I wrote back. It took me a week to figure out what I actually wanted to say, and what I finally wrote was something like, I want a relationship with you, but I need it to be honest. I can't keep performing okayness for your comfort. If we talk, we have to be able to talk about what actually happened. She agreed. Cautiously, imperfectly, but she agreed. We are not where we were. I don't think we'll ever be where I'd once hoped we would be. But there's something more real between us now than the performance we'd both been keeping up for years, and I think that's worth more than the comfortable version. Daniel crossed the finish line of that half marathon in 2 hours and 47 minutes, which is not a fast time by any objective measure, and was the most beautiful thing I've ever watched. I stood at the line holding a sign his physical therapist helped our neighbor's kid paint, and when he came around the final corner and saw me, he did this thing with his face. Not quite a smile, more like relief. And I thought, we built this. Out of the worst thing, we made this. I call my mother on Sundays now. The calls are shorter than they used to be, and more careful on both sides, and sometimes there's still a version of the old distance. But she asked me, last month, to tell her what that year was actually like. Not to comfort her, not to wrap it up neatly, just because she wanted to know. I told her. All of it. The parking garage. The spreadsheets. The month of bad math at 4 a.m. The cruise photo. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. No reasons, no strength, just sorry. It was enough to keep going.